Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahi Tejasvinavaditam Astama Vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om Shri Rama Rama Ramati Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Ramanama Varanani. We delight in the beautiful name of Sri Rama again and again, for even if we remember his name only once, then this name bestows a fruit on us equal to the recitation of 1,000 names of the all-pervading one, Lord Vishnu. So today there are two themes really. Not only is the usual story of Rama, Ramayana, continuing, but we also have a birthday celebration, the Janmashtami of Swami Ramakrishnananda. And so I'll try and incorporate some of his teachings into the talk. We may have to make two separate themes, but anyway. So if you recall, we left off where Ravana was having his counsel, what to do. And so we'll just review some of the things that we said last week. Now, not only has he ignored the counsel of Vibhishana, but he's taken on all the so-called counseling of those who are flattering him and encouraging warfare. And Ravana, in fairness, has listened very patiently. But of course, flattery is something that we can't resist. What is the nature of somebody of steady wisdom? Is completely immune to praise and blame, hot or cold, any of the pairs of opposites. We don't find this in Ravana. And so while we see in the story there are elements there which are notably praiseworthy in Ravana, that's why he's so powerful. But you see this overwhelming idea that firstly that he's right, that he was justified in taking something from the forest, namely Sita. And that the only problem was, of course, he cannot engage with her intimately without her consent. This is part of the boon that Brahma has given him. And so he explains his position that he has been prevented from knowing Sita. He says, I may take a woman captive. He thinks it's correct. He says, but if I molest her modesty against her consent, then my head will burst into pieces. And this is the curse inflicted on me by Brahma, the creator. What does that mean? All our power comes as a result of the cosmic mind that mythology calls Brahma. Everything we think will condense into a scene in front of us. We have to be careful what we think of. It's not that all meditators are spiritual people. Meditation is the key to taking the attention and steering it in a non-contradicted way so we get what we want. Any desire that you have had, which is accompanied by dedication, determination, whether it's good or bad, will come to fruition for you. This is the unbending law of cause and effect, what we call karma. This is the unbending law of sowing and reaping. And so thought is that seed that gives us all our difficulties or rewards in the future. But you see, you cannot go against the natural order of things. And the natural order of things includes a high moral code. And if you transgress that, then literally, in this case, it's poetically, your head will fall off. That is, that all the central intelligence, or the headquarters, as it were, will be ruined. Prahasta, he recounts the invincible strength of Ravana. Again, he's trying to flatter him. And the flattery is tickling the king's vanity, to the extent that they're all yes men and they all applaud the chief counselor's speech. But it is Vibhishana who is the solitary figure, and he doesn't join in this applause. He's the one outstanding voice of reason. And he wants, and he's not afraid to go against the majority. And he warns his brother of the impending death and of the destruction of Lanka. He does this in clear, unmistakable terms. And he defines the divine valor that he sees in Ram. And of course, Indrajit, who is his nephew, dislikes this note. And he blurts out that he's ashamed of his uncle's cowardice. He lacks the mettle of our race, he says, or his intentions are against us. We are not meekly submitting to his proposal. Surely, even the deities, the demigods, the demons, any being outside our range of immediate observation, all of these are subdued. Ravana is capable of doing it. So who are these petty humans? Don't forget, Ravana's boon is to be protected against any being other than mere insignificant humans. This is the whole reason why the whole adventure, the whole story of Rama, Lakshmana, and his brothers Sita and so on, all unfold. And so Vibhishana gives a calm reply to this. Nephew, he says, you're still inexperienced. You see, strength without virtue leads to damnation. Let's consider this now. Strength without virtue. All the wars that we can think of involve strength without virtue, misunderstandings. I once heard a comic say, here's an artificial headline. Archduke Ferdinand, still alive. World War I is a mistake. Imagine. So on a domestic level, on a national level, international level, we find all these warmongering people telling us something significant about our human nature. We all talk of peace, we all say we want peace, but actually we do not. If we really wanted it, there would be no wars whatsoever. And when you boil it down, what is it to do with? It's to do with that sense of agency, the actor-prophet complex, which we call ego, inflated on a national level and stirred up in a community with a certain identity and ideal and so on and so forth. And so there's no doubt there is strength, but if there's no virtue, it leads to damnation, as we always have to remember. The Mundaka Upanishad, Satyameva Jayate, which is the Indian national motto, see, truth alone triumphs. That's the fact of it. Anyway, he says, you see, you and the ministers are party to your father's wickedness. You are all heading towards annihilation. What we call, you see, guilty by association or support. Because of love for my people, I oppose your evil designs. Because he sees that this rash idea of war will be destructive and self-destructive. We've already seen what Hanuman can do. Now, Ravana's nature, of course, is he doesn't like this kind of news. He's already boosted with flattery. He's fired up with his own self-importance. And he gets enraged and he thunders. He says, one may live with sworn enemies and with serpents, but never with treacherous brothers and cousins. It's a direct attack on Vibhishana. He says the elephant in the forest isn't afraid of the hunters, as it's afraid of the tamed brother elephant that betrays it to the hunters. By the way, there's a very significant insight into the workings of cities and so on, civilizations of that day, that domestic elephants were trained. They were the earth-moving machinery of the ancient days. And he says, as the bee abandons the flower after sucking the honey, the envious brother topples down his prosperous brother at a critical time. Vibhishana, I would have you slain this very moment. Because you're my brother, I'm going to spare you. But go away, vanish from my sight. I don't want to see you. And Vibhishana makes his parting statement. Well, brother, goaded by your evil ways, you're rushing headlong towards destruction. Let me at least save Lanka to the extent that I can. And with 4 other good Rakshasas, Vibhishana rises into the air and hastens northward. He is going to find Rama. He's going to see where Rama is encamped. And so this brings us to a certain point within the story. Now, we will see that Kumbhakarna, the youngest brother of Ravana, he also speaks in the assembly. And he says, well, great king, ignoring the principles of statecraft, you have run into great danger. If you had any grievance about Rama and Lakshmana, you should have met them face to face and defeated and slain them before carrying off Sita. But hindsight is a wonderful thing, you see. And Kumbhakarna, where was he when all this was happening? He was sleeping, as we all are, in the depths of our own ignorance. But he makes a good point. He is also critical of Ravana, but he doesn't make the same point as Vibhishana. He says, okay, so now that it's done. So let's gather our forces. And so he says, if you had acted in this way, that is preemptive action, then even Sita would have admired you, and there would have been a possibility of her accepting you if you had waged war and defeated Rama straight away. And as waters flow down a mountain, she would have followed a victorious warrior. You can see in his ignorance, he's assuming that Sita is like everyone else, that she will follow in this way by virtue of, okay, there's a conquest. This is a customary thing. And so I am part of the booty of the conquest. And after all, I'm going to live in a palace. I'm going to be, treated with great respect. And I'm going to have everything that I desire, but this is not the nature of Sita. He says, you didn't consult us before committing the offense and incur the enmity of Rama, but now it's too late. So you have to seek our advice now after the fact. And this isn't really the wide way of doing things. It's not the way that a king should follow. This is the criticism. Anyway, having openly spoken harshly like this, Kumbhakarna looks at the king and sees he was pained. Now it's his own brother again. So affectionate as he was brave, he couldn't endure the sadness in his brother's face. So he says, well, let bygones be bygones. Nothing we can do to change it. One can't forsake one's honor. So Kumbhakarna was under no delusion as to the consequences, actually. But his generous spirit accepts them for the sake of the brothers, that the brother that he puts on a pedestal and idolizes. He knows that Rama was a peerless warrior, and he knew the power of his bow and also the limitations of the boons that Ravana has received from the deities. Deities means what? Means all the multiple graces, all the glories of the divine that combine to make this universe that we live in. So, but it was no good talking or taking the heart out of others and no good discouraging others. You have to make the best of a difficult situation. And so, in the face of the unavoidable peril, he also began to speak, vaunting words, just like the rest of those counselors and advisors. And he makes this argument because we can justify anything that we do. Sometimes we can justify what we call justified anger. There's no such thing. He says, what you did may be wrong, and so too the way you chose to do it. You've done first what you should have done last, and yet it doesn't matter. I shall slay Rama. I'll take responsibility. Don't be afraid. Now let's take a philosophical understanding of this. Kumbhakarna represents tamas, the darkness of laziness, indolence, sleep, and so on. And now he's going to conquer Rama, who represents the highest virtues contained within the category of sattva. We think that we can overcome goodness by using a tactic, bringing tamas out. We can never do it. Anyway, he makes this mistake. So he says, don't be afraid. One or two of his arrows may touch me, that's okay, but in spite of it, I shall kill him, and I shall drink his blood, and I shall be victorious, and victory will actually be yours. My brother, lay aside your care and think of other things. I'll handle it. Now, some people suggest that Kumbhakarna was dull, and so he thus contradicted himself, but it wasn't stupidity exactly. It was due to actually a generous affection that he accepted the inevitable fearlessly. And he was a proud warrior, that much. He loved his brother and his people, and he decided on honorable death with them. So the characteristic, not afraid of death. None of us should be afraid of death because we have dress rehearsal for every night. We vacate our passport personality and we go into a dream where we engage in multiple personalities, and then a blankness. We register as a kind of peace. According to our philosophy, that condition should be re-registered, sleeping on God's lap, sleeping in the presence of the divine. We register it from the waking state as unimportant, as insignificant, as a nothing. Anyway, again, Prahasta is telling of the king's strength. Ravana, he grows enthusiastic. He has the support seemingly of everybody other than Vibhishana and some others. Didn't he vanquish Kubera? Didn't he drive Kubera out of Lanka single-handedly? And who dares to oppose me? Let us see. So pride will be his downfall. Lust and pride, these two things will be his downfall. And of course, there are always supporters for this. They all applaud his words. And we can easily imagine the tragic events of the last century where Hitler dominates people's minds and everybody supports him. He was extremely popular. And look at the damage that he caused. Anyway, as I mentioned, Vibhishana alone doesn't join in the applause. And we know then the subsequent thing that happens. And he goes off northwards to see if he can save the situation through diplomacy. So we now come to a different chapter, and we change the scene. And having committed this sin and run into danger, Ravana doesn't see how to get himself out of this. See, like other kings who are in a quandary, he calls this councils for consultation and so on, and drinks in the flattering words and sees that only two people have spoken harshly. And one, if we remember, says, you've committed a sin, a fault, but I'll give up my life for you. That's Kumbhakarna. And the other one is Vibhishana. Vibhishana Shana, who says, you have committed a sin. They both agree on this, but there's still time for repentance and escape from consequences. If you take this right and wise course, then we shall all escape destruction, do it for the highest good, and we shall live happily. And we can restore Sita and seek pardon of Rama, and she will assert nothing adverse happened to her. Ravana's reply is very clear. Never. It's an uncompromising attitude. And so, Vibhishana, as I say, he parts ways, and in a conflict of duties, each one follows his own nature. Not everybody can follow one and the same path. And we have to take note, Ravana's self-indulgent vanity would not let him admit his error or retrace his steps. A great mark of a great person is the ability to humbly admit when they're wrong and then see if they can redress it. And so, this is not characteristic of Ravana. Very rarely does one who has committed a sin confess defeat, in fact. It requires some courage of a bad sort to commit a sin, but it requires much greater courage of a noble kind to confess it and correct it. And so it was this noble courage that Ravana lacks. Now, bear in mind, when we assess our own condition, we also probably lack it. So when an evil is being perpetrated or perpetrated, the friends of the evildoer, they face a difficult problem. And some are constrained against their better judgment to espouse their own cause through gratitude for past kindness, a sense of loyalty, even though it's misplaced, or affinities of blood, kinship, etc. But others think it's their duty to try and reform the sinner, regardless of his anger and hatred and the consequent danger to themselves. And if their efforts fail, then there's no other way. We have to part company. It's the same with us. We have to assess whether our current company is in our favor or otherwise. And sometimes we have to break loyalties for the greater good. And so, this is all a question of harmony, what we call dharma, which has a root. It means the thing that knits everything together in a harmonious way. So, these people, they hold that it can never be one's duty to support or cooperate with adharma, the opposite of it. And it would indeed be adharma to refrain from doing one's best to reform the person, the sinner, let's say, or to cooperate in his actual sin. And in the Ramayana, Kumbhakarna and Vibhishana represent these two different types. And one represents the sattvic approach, the other one really more of a tamasic approach. If Ravana, one, you can rephrase it, one represents strength, the other one represents weakness looking like strength. If Ravana had told Vibhishana, come, let's go to the Dandaka forest and carry off Sita, it's inconceivable that Vibhishana would have complied with this. That's why we have to respect Vibhishana. Now, the curious thing is Vibhishana is classified, along with Ravana, as Rakshasa. And so, in a sense, we are all Rakshasa. That means our mind is disturbed and not necessarily perfect. We have blemishes. But you see, in Vibhishana's case, he has gone to a higher, nobler level and is ready to embrace and exhibit virtues. And in doing that, he becomes a friend of Rama, we'll see. It's the same thing, in cultivating our virtues, we become God's friend. Now, at least now, he thinks restore Sita and be happy is his point of view. And he tries to persuade, of course, Ravana in many different ways. He has done it. And he also mentions how Rama will surely forgive you because of his nobility. So take the way of dharma, take the way of righteousness. But Ravana won't listen. In fact, he makes his own brother Vibhishana an enemy of himself, and he has no alternative but to part company from the perverse and wickedness of Ravana, and he does so. Now, this is his own brother, and you can see that there will be the part of the courage is to break ties with your own brother and hope that in the long run you can rescue him for the greater good. If we find fault with Vibhishana, it's because our concern for dharma will be weak. But can we find fault with Kumbhakarna? Well, we can't really do this either, actually. He's one of those noble soldiers of lost causes whose faults we forgive for their selfless loyalty and sublime acceptance of death. But because we cannot condemn Kumbhakarna, just stated as a fact, it doesn't follow that we must condemn Vibhishana. So there are some people today who rejoice in arguing against Dharma and against Vibhishana, in effect. So we have to elaborate this point. Many people are restrained from evil, but by the wholesome fear that if they commit sin, they'll forfeit the affection and goodwill of their friends and kinsmen. This is not a good measure. This fear is a strong incentive to good behavior, no doubt, and its removal will be a serious loss in society, but it's only temporary. And all this is forgotten by those who argue that Vibhishana was a traitor, because this has been an argument about the merits and demerits of both. And so it requires some form of explanation. And Ravana was the first, unfortunately, by no means the last, to dub him by that name, coward. Those who are anxious to retain the support of kinsfolk, family, and so on, while pursuing, we might say, evil ways or weakness, disapprove of Vibhishana's conduct. But Vibhishana wasn't afraid of being a traitor. He would have nothing to do with the dharma. And his course was, however, not easy, as we shall see. And so we find throughout the story the weighing up of different dilemmas, moral dilemmas, which side will go on. And in weighing this up well, we should surely apply our superior knowledge. The Vanara chieftain, standing on the northern seashore, all of a sudden witnessed that the sky lit up with a golden glow like the summit of Mount Meru. And it was too steady to be a flash of lightning, so they were curious about it. And in the brightness could be distinguished the forms of 5 big Rakshasas. Sugriva, the king and the commander of the Vanaras, looking at them said, "You see, there's no doubt these are Rakshasas and they've come from Lanka, and naturally hostile designs." Imagine now, in modern times, if suddenly combative airplanes streak across the sky, what will your reaction be? Anyway, on hearing this, the Vanara warriors start arming themselves with, in this case, trees and boulders and any resources that they have around them. And they resolve, let's go, we shall intercept and slay them and bring them down to earth. And Vibhishana, hearing these words of the Vanaras, or suspecting them at least, he shows no signs of fear, but from above, with calm courage, speaks out in a clear voice. "Vibhishana stands here before you," he says, "the brother of Ravana, the wicked king of the Rakshasas. I am here before you, and none other than brother to Ravana, who killed Jatayu and carried off Sita by force, and is now keeping her prisoner in Lanka." He identifies himself fearlessly. "Now in vain I have striven to turn him from his wicked designs. I've advised him to restore Sita and seek Rama's forgiveness. And all the response I got was disdain and public insult. And so I'm standing here before you. I'm renouncing my kingdom, or whenever I'm due to inherit it. I'm renouncing my wife, my children, my family, because I'm seeking service and sanctuary at Rama's feet. And I pray you convey this information to Rama. In other words, he's taken up the path of renunciation for the higher good. There was a discussion I was involved in maybe 2 days ago or so about from people who didn't like Buddhism, I suppose, saying how Gautama Siddhartha, at the age of whatever it was, 29, I think it was, left his wife and son in the dead of night. And how can somebody abandon his wife and child? Of course, it's out of context, because this is in the context of a palace with relatives and so on. And how many Buddhas will we have bold enough to go and take a path of renunciation in order to find out what is the truth and make a transformation from Gautama Siddhartha to the Buddha, the enlightened one, for the good of humanity, the savior of the world. So this is the glory of renunciation. And whether you're a householder or not, you have to go on the path of renunciation. What does it mean? Give up wife and children? No. It means give up your attachment to them. How do you do that? By correctly re-registering. These are not yours. They belong to God. Some people say, oh, I would like a house. I would like my nice house. Well, don't take off the my. It's all God's. There's nothing that belongs to you. The energy you're using is borrowed energy. So we have to attribute it to the correct source. Anyway, Sugriva, of course, mistrusts the good faith of the Rakshasa king's brother and reports this to Rama. After all, he's a Rakshasa. And Vibhishana, the brother of Ravana, has come here with 4 Rakshasa friends, and he's asking for sanctuary at your feet. They're standing there in the sky, so please consider well, you who are skilled in all these different affairs, and your judgment is valued, so what should be done now? These Rakshasas are adepts in duplicity. They can make themselves invisible. They can do many other tricks. They have all the skill and courage of the wicked, so we cannot trust them. I believe that these Rakshasas have been sent by Ravana himself, probably as spies or maybe to destroy you or whatever it is. So, and they've come here to mix with us for subversive purposes, pretending that they are friends. Or maybe they intend seeking an opportunity to assassinate the leaders in our camp, all of us. And so whatever Vibhishana may say, we can't forget that he is the brother of our enemy. By birth, he belongs to the wicked Rakshasa race. How can we trust him? It's some trick of Ravana. I have no doubt that it's a trick. It's best to kill him and his companions right now. And if we admit him into our camp, then he'll betray us at the first opportunity and return to his own people. This is the way in which we will be done away with. So please give us your permission to destroy Ravana's brother and his followers immediately. And having thus frankly expressed his feelings at the sight of the Rakshasa, Sugriva stands in silence, awaits Rama's reply. Rama, as a good counselor, listens, gets all the information. He also turns to Hanuman and other leaders, and he says this. He says, well, you have heard the words of the king, who is well versed in policy, in politics. Ravana's brothers come and waits for our pleasure. I wish to know your opinion on this matter. See, in times of crisis, one should ask for the advice of friends. Tell me without reservation what you feel in your hearts. Now this is in contrast to Ravana. He's also sought counsel, but not listened. not listen to the words of real advice. Only listen to flattery. And Angala, the Vanara prince, he says, well, he has come from our enemy's camp, and we don't know whether he has come of his own accord or whether he's was sent by our enemy. While perhaps it would not be right to reject him out of hand, it would also be dangerous to accept him without testing him. So let's at least watch his behavior carefully without giving him any opening for mischief. And if his movements are suspicious, then we can throw him out. And if they are friendly and show good faith, we shall accept them. And so the son of Vali spoke in this way. Sharabha says also, I don't think it's safe to admit him now to decide later what to do with him. Even now, let us test him through skillful questions. And let's decide based on this, once and for all, what we will do with him. A slight difference of opinion. Jambavan, he says, well, nothing can be discovered by testing such people. If he has come here hiding treacherous intentions, no test can discover the truth. Ravana is our inveterate foe. His brother says that he has all of a sudden broken with him and come over to us. Well, this sudden rupture with a brother is hard to believe. Now we see this, of course, in world history where alliances are made, where your enemy becomes your friend. And sometimes it works, most times it works, but sometimes it doesn't. We have not yet crossed the sea. What's his motive in seeking safety with us while we are on this shore? And all this is very suspicious. You see, these Rakshasas, they're a deceitful race, and I don't think we can trust them, and I think we shouldn't admit him. Now another counselor says, Minder, says, how can we reject a man on mere suspicion? Only after careful examination can we decide how to deal with him. And so he says that he has forsaken Ravana, we take it at face value, and come over to us. We can find out the truth of this statement. So some of us should talk to him, then decide, surely we have enough ability to do this. Now, of course, Rama, like a wise person, he listens to all these diverse opinions. And finally, he turns to Hanuman for Hanuman's wisdom. And in response to Rama's invitation, Hanuman expresses his opinion. And he does it in such a way that the words are sweet and full of wisdom. He says, why should you ask for our advice? You're asking for advice. Why should you do that in the first place? Not even Brihaspati has anything to tell you that you don't already know. This is the supreme wisdom of Hanuman, recognizing Rama's divinity. If it's dangerous to admit Vibhishana, how is the danger met by delay and trial? Where is the time or opportunity for a test? And also, Vibhishana hasn't approached us stealthily. He's been bold. He has come to us with frank openness and a clear object. So what is there for scouts to discover about him? It has been said by some that his sudden advent is suspicious. But why? What wonder is there if Vibhishana became disguised with Ravana and foresaw his certain disgrace and a defeat? What wonder is there if he recognized your heroic virtues and nobility and the certainty of your victory? To me, the time and manner of his coming gives no room for suspicion. It has been suggested that before admitting him, our leaders should put questions and examining questions and weigh up his answers. But one who knows that he is suspected wouldn't speak or behave naturally. He would be afraid that we are out to find only faults in him. And so his real nature will not be revealed. This is the key. When in medieval times people get tortured, they simply admit rather than endure the pain. So then he goes on, I see no cause for suspicion in the face or in his speech of this Rakshasa's suppliant. his carefree looks, they disclose a kind of purity or guileless or innocence of his heart. The wise say that the face is a perfect mirror of the heart, and I think that Vibhishana has come here honestly to seek sanctuary at your feet. There's nothing strange in his action. He knows Ravana's real weakness. He knows that the Lord of Lanka is fated to fall. He knows too that you have slain Vali and given his kingdom to Sugriva. So granting that his real motive is to secure for himself the sovereignty of Lanka, there's nothing wrong in it. And certainly it's a guarantee that he will be loyal to us. So I feel that we should admit him. Now the Vanara chiefs thus all differed in their points of view. Kumbhakarna acted according to ordinary morality. It was a simple thing which everybody could understand. But Vibhishana, he follows a higher morality. The path he chose was more difficult and likely to be blamed. He knew, how could anyone else know, his inward sufferings at the thought of Ravana's evil doings. See, ordinary people couldn't sympathize with his situation, but hence the Vanaras failed to understand the conflict in his own mind. And even today, people find it hard, without elaborate explanation, to appreciate Vibhishana aright. Anyway, Rama listens patiently to the various views of the Vanara chiefs, and when at last he hears Hanuman's words, he is filled with joy. Rama, steadfast in his own dharma, who finds satisfaction in Hanuman's utterance. A good man is glad when a friend's opinion supports his decision on a question of duty. If we read all the Shastra, whether it's the Mahabharata or the extract of it, the Bhagavad Gita, is all to do with duty. I have heard, oh, Krishna, we can't admire him, he was advocating war. No, he was advocating duty. So if a man comes as a friend, says Rama, how can I reject him? It's against the law of my life, and all of you, my friends and helpers, should know this. Once a man surrenders himself, one should overlook all his faults. Anyway, of course, Sugriva, who originally opined to begin with, he wasn't that satisfied. He also has his say. This Rakshasa has, on his own showing, deserted his brother whose cause he considers lost. How can one put faith in a person who forsakes his own brother in his need? And Valmiki himself records that on hearing these words of Sugriva, Rama turns to Lakshmana with a smile. And probably the smile was provoked by Sugriva's forgetfulness of his own fraternal conduct in his indignant condemnation of Vibhishana. Wasn't it Sugriva who went against Vali? Anyway, Rama says to Sugriva, I see what you mean, but listen, it's natural for kings to suspect brothers and neighbor kings. Good kings who entertain no such suspicion are exceptions, and most kings imagine that brothers envy them. What wonder then if Ravana suspects and insults Vibhishana? It follows that Vibhishana fears danger to himself if he stays on in Lanka. So I conclude, therefore, that he has no sinister motive against us in coming here for refuge. Let us go further and grant that he has eyes on the kingdom, expecting Ravana's defeat at our hands. Maybe that's it. Maybe he wants the kingdom, and that's okay. Even in this ambition, there's nothing wrong. Well, Lakshmana, can we expect all people to be like our Bharata? Don't forget, Bharata has eschewed the kingdom, putting Rama's own shoes on the throne and choosing to live outside Ayodhya. And so, having said all this, Rama was silent for a moment, because he now gets lost in the remembrance of Bharata's selfless love. Now we're going to leave it there for the time being, because I want now to complete the next part of this. And the next part of this will now be to see what does Swami Ramakrishnananda have to teach us. And so his teachings are summarized in a text, which is really compiled and written as originally the apostles of Ramakrishna, now as disciples of Ramakrishna, compiled by the distinguished Swami Ramakrishnananda. So I'll read a few teachings. He says, God plays the part of a creator that he may have the fun of creating, preserving, and destroying. It's a peculiar way of looking at things. We think that God initially is at a distance. He creates, he preserves, he destroys, and we can give different modes, names of modes, as Brahma, Vishnu, or Shiva. But he's playing the part of the creator and of the sustainer and of the resolver. And why? So that he may have the fun of creating, preserving, and destroying. In other words, the only explanation for life is Lila. Adopting this philosophy, we can surely not take all the things in life so seriously. Because all of us have various problems and difficulties. We've seen how Rama has his difficulties, considerable difficulties. That is God incarnate, and even that, in that he has his difficulties. We can see how Vibhishana plays this role. And all things that we see play their appropriate role, like jigsaw pieces fitting into a puzzle for the overall good and harmony. At the moment, we are looking far, far out into the universe. What will we find? Astonishing sights of creativity and preservation and destruction. There's a pattern. So that is the method he always follows. When he wants to create, and this God's relationship with Maya, this is infinitely powerful. Maya is an alternative word for Leela. We can say Maya Leela. That is, things are not quite what they appear to be. And there's not that, there's two things. God and Maya, it is all the same thing. He says God is infinitely powerful, so he has the power to put down the irresistible power of Maya. But what is our relationship with Maya, he says? We are slaves. You cannot be destroyed by Maya, but she can make you miserable through eternity. Maya is feminine. Now, it's not a slur on feminine or femininity or feminism. It is simply saying that the dynamic aspect of this we can think of as in a feminine way. So that Maya, Shakti, Prakriti, all of these terms become synonymous, ultimately, in combined philosophy. Now, how are we going to get rid of this Maya? Only by the help of God can we hope to get rid of her, but she is also that. I was once attending a philosophy class in a certain place, and somebody made this statement: we need to get rid of Maya. I said, why would you want to do that? It is through Maya that you'll save yourself. Because one of the aspects of Maya will be where Maya only has these three aspects, which we call gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. That's all there is. And by promoting sattva, becomes a revealing thing. Tamas is a hiding thing. Rajas is an obscuring thing. But sattva is a revealing thing. We remove Maya, so to speak, through Maya. He says, if you know that you are eternal and indestructible, that you're not the body, you are spirit, and the self is beyond the reach of this illusion that Maya has created. That self is one with God. If you can identify yourself with this real self of yours and throw away yourself, your small self, then you can go beyond the dominion of Maya. And this path is known as Jnana Marga. Don't think that Jnana Marga is estranged from our normal approach. We require it. We also require Bhakti Marga. We also require Karma Marga. We also require Dhyana Marga. We require all of these things. But you see, it begins with an identification. Let's think of Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield. Sometimes I ask people who is the most ancient psychologist you know of? They say Freud or Jung or whatever it is, and some say Buddha, and I said, no, it's Krishna. Arjuna was suffering from what is evidently a nervous breakdown. And Krishna doesn't say, please lie here, tell me all about your alcoholic father or your mother or this or that, and how you were abused as a child, how you feel, and why you have poor me feelings, and why you feel grieved, and all the rest of it. No, he tells it straight. Wind cannot, fire cannot burn you. Water cannot wet you. Wind cannot dry you. You are the immortal Atman. You are the immortal self. So this is a formula that can be used. Once we are convinced of that and see that everywhere, all the other petty things somehow dissolve. So it is some tool in your toolbox that you can use. You can choose to use other tools also. You can choose to use the dualistic tool, a sense of being embodied, in which case God becomes an entity to be worshipped, a relationship to be formed. When things get really tough, then your final all-purpose tool will be non-dualism that says, I alone exist, I am that self, supreme self. And so, if you can identify yourself with this real self of yours and throw away your small embodied self, your small ego, then you can go beyond the dominion of Maya, and this path is known as Jnana Marga. Now, those who can resist the demands of the body can afford to wage an incessant war, if you like, against Maya and come out victorious. But these people are very few. It's better to resist ye not evil, as Jesus would put it. For the others, they can only take refuge at God's feet. That's the formula. A select few can do it. But most of us will say, we take refuge like a child at the divine feet. And then the question arises, what kind of devotion takes us to God? And then here says, the child's devotion to the mother. Why does the baby go to the mother? Because it has reasoned out that the mother is the best friend it has. Now, although we say this is Swami Ramakrishnananda's teachings, more accurately, this is Swami Ramakrishnananda's dimension of Ramakrishna's teachings. Ramakrishna himself has taught him this, not as a theory, but from his own empirical experience. And we can say, Swami Ramakrishnananda would not say this if it wasn't also his own empirical experience. He says, because you have previously reasoned out that God will help you and no one else can, so as the baby goes to its mother, you also will go to God. Some other parts of his teachings go like this. No man who has not true love towards God can be religious. Religion begins when attraction towards God is greater than attraction towards the world. Very often people use the term religion as a kind of antithesis to, say, modern science, reasoning. But this is not what is meant by religion. Religion begins when there's an internal journey, when there's a sincerity, when there's an adoption of a bhava, an attitude towards your Ishtadevata. And that then becomes an attraction. We don't have to worry about renunciation. We don't have to worry about leaving off things. The attraction overwhelms everything else. The love of God replaces your love for all the other little things. So the attraction, he says, towards the world means, and by the world he means all the people and places and events and scenes before us. It means that egotism, attraction towards God, means self-surrender. Actually, very few of us, he says, believe in God all the time. How do we know this? Because we allow anxieties and fears to rise in our minds. At that moment, we are complete atheists. We don't believe in a God at that point. We are struggling as an individual thinking that will solve the problem, and allowing these fears and doubts to occupy, fears, doubts, and temptations to occupy the mental field. If we really have faith in God and in His infinite power of goodness, we can never feel fearful about anything. Imagine. If we do a self-examination, we'd find there were all kinds of fears, all kinds of doubts, there were all kinds of internal conversations which bring the mind down. Then we can equally introduce internal conversations that bring the mind up. That is the purpose of reading these things and studying these things. The purpose of philosophy, not just to entertain intellectual gymnastics, not at all, that has no value, but applied philosophy, living philosophy. So what makes the mind impure? Well, ask Buddha, ask Krishna, ask Jesus. They only have one answer: desire. What is desire? Desire is a feeling I have some kind of gap or vacuum in me that can be filled from the outside. But what does Vedanta say? There's no lack of fullness in you. There's no emptiness in you. When you find that, you'll see all your behavior becomes an expression of this fullness. You become a happy person. And if you're a happy person mentally, and I'm quoting here from Dr. Emmett Fox, a great Vedantist that was in the 19th century, died in the 20th century. And he makes this astonishing statement. It is not health that makes you happy. It is happiness that gives you health. So what makes the mind impure? Asks Swami Ramakrishnananda. He says desire. Free the mind of all desires and at once it becomes pure. A person, however, who has no idea of God can never get rid of desire. An astonishing statement. Even what happens if you're an atheist? Because Swami Vivekananda said, if you have complete sincerity, truthfulness, and if you have complete selflessness, that means lack of desire, you'll attain the same thing as a theist. But you see, it requires an ideal of some kind. Even an atheist will have to have it. And so the lover of God sees that instead of bringing enjoyment, these desires are the source of all miseries. He understands that in God alone he can find the satisfaction of all desires for his infinite bliss, and all other pleasures are finite and perishable. And so these are some of the teachings of the revered Swami Ramakrishnananda, who was given charge of what was then Madras or Chennai, started the work in South India at the request of the people of Madras in those days, as it was called. And Swami Vivekananda said, I'm sending you somebody who is more orthodox than anybody there. He'll be able to share in your orthodoxy, and yet, you see, the quality of the person is somebody who's been touched by his master, and somebody who never deserted the master, even in the form of ashes. When the Baranagal monastery was there, all the others went off wandering, but he maintained the devotion there to this. In fact, service to the Guru was his real only spiritual practice. So we leave that off there. So thanks. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.